Today we're going to talk about centering things. Now, I know you all know how to use flexbox, you all know how to use grid, it's easy, blah, 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 blah. But today I want to talk about a situation that's a little bit sneakier where I still see people get tripped up. So let's take a look at this example here. So I've got this pricing card that I've built, and it's got these features, right? And each feature has an icon next to it. And the icon is not the exact same size as the text, so we have to center the icon so it looks like it's in the right place. So you can see here on each LI, I've got flex item center to center the SVG icon with the text. If I remove this and set it to say like item start, you can see it's off a little bit vertically, right? It's slightly higher up than it should be. But look what happens when I resize this and the text wraps. Notice how the icons are centered with the entire block of text. What we really want here is for the icons to be centered with the first line of text. So just naively using Flexbox to center this stuff isn't really going to give us the results that we actually want to achieve a really nice polished design here. So I'm going to walk through a couple different solutions to this problem and show you how I would solve this myself. So one way that we can solve this is by getting rid of the centering, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the first one as like the broken example, and then we'll sort of progressively try out a couple different ideas on each individual item. So let's get rid of the centering on the second one here as a starting point. So you can see, as sort of expected, it's slightly off. It's a little bit too high. So sort of the simplest way to fix this is to just like push it down a little bit with some margin, right? So how do we know how much margin to use? Well, the line height of this text is 6, which translates to 24 pixels in Tailwind. And the height of the SVG is 5, which translates to 20 pixels. So it's a difference of 4 pixels. Divide that by 2 so you know how much should be above and how much should be below. And that gives us 2 pixels, so we need to nudge it down. So I'm going to add just like MT 0.5 here, and that'll shove it down by 2 pixels. And now it works, right? It's centered the way that we want. So this solution works. It's fine. What I don't really love about it though is that it's a little, it's not really expressive and declarative. There's not really a clear connection between what's happening here and what's happening here. You really have to dig in deep to understand the relationship between this 6 and this 0.5. Say that we changed the line height here to 7. Now this is going to be off again, and you're going to have to come in here and do this math all over again. So I don't totally love this solution for that reason. What we're trying to do here is communicate that we want the icon centered with the first line of text. And this is not really communicating that, in my opinion. It's just sort of imperatively shoving it down. So let's try another solution. I'm going to wrap this SVG in a span, okay? And I'm going to remove the item center from here and bring this back to item start like the other one. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this span an explicit height that matches the line height up here. So we know that the line height is 6, which is 24 pixels. Let's give this span a height of 6. And now we have a container that matches the height of the first line of text. Now within that container, if we center the SVG, now we have an SVG that's perfectly centered, and we're actually saying, like, I want to center this in a space that's 6 tall or 24 pixels tall. I think this communicates the intent a little bit better, but it still has that problem where if I change the line height, it sort of breaks, right? This is slightly off now. It's not exactly in the right place. So how can we solve that? There's 2 solutions, okay? The first one is we could create a CSS variable to sort of store this 6 value. So we could do something like, let's set a line height here to spacing 6, okay? And we'll set this to use the configured line height. And let's just prove that that's actually doing something. Let's set this to 7. Does it change? Yep. All right. And then down here, we could set this height to also use our line height variable, right? And now that's going to be perfectly centered. And if we adjust this to 8, it still stays centered with the first line of text. So this works. It's a little bit verbose though. There's another way we can do it that's really terse. So you know how CSS supports tons of different units, right? So we've got rem, we've got em, we've got pixels, we've got dynamic viewport height, stuff like that. CSS fairly recently added support for a new unit called LH, which means the current line height. So 1 LH is going to be whatever the current line height is set to. 2 LH is going to be double the current line height. So this is really convenient, right? Because we're trying to set the space that this SVG needs to be centered in to the current line height. So I'm going to set this back to 6, get rid of this CSS variable. And then down here where we were using the CSS variable, I'm going to use an arbitrary value in Tailwind to set the height to 1LH. And this should give us the same effect that we were seeing before, where if I increase this, it stays centered and everything sort of stays locked together. You can see all the other solutions are kind of busted here, but this one stays totally locked in, which is really cool. So I really like this solution. I think it really communicates what we're actually trying to do in a very expressive way and sort of creates the right relationships between things, which is really slick. But I'm going to show you one more solution that's even simpler. So a little bit of trivia that I don't think a lot of people know, that I didn't even know until pretty recently, is that when you have an SVG with a defined view box like this one, so this SVG is square, right, in nature. Its view box is 20 pixels wide, 20 pixels tall. When you have an SVG with a defined view box and you give it a size that doesn't match the aspect ratio of that view box, the SVG by default will center its contents within the space that you give it. It won't stretch it or anything like that, like you might expect. So here we're explicitly setting the size of the SVG to be a 20 pixel square. But as you might have started to guess based on what I'm saying, we could sort of cheat here and only give it a width of 5 and give it a height of 6. And if we get rid of this item center here, we should see the same result. Pretty neat, right? Now, of course, we have the same problem here that we had before, where the 6 is hard-coded to match the 6 in the line height declaration above. But just like we did here, we can replace this with the line height unit and everything will be perfectly synced up. So let's set the height of this to be 1 LH like we did above. And now if we go and adjust this line height to 7, it stays centered. To 8, stay centered, to 9, stay centered. Works beautifully. And in this situation, we didn't even have to create that extra wrapper element like we did in the other solutions. So if you're working specifically with SVGs, I think this is a cool way to do it very tersely. But as a more generalized solution that can work on a lot of different situations, this trick is really great. You can put anything in here as long as the parent container has an explicit height set on it that matches the line height of the text that you're trying to center it relative to. So don't make this mistake. Don't align your icons vertically centered with the block of text, because when things wrap, things are going to get messed up. Always align them centered with the first line of content so that when the text wraps, things stay exactly where you want them to be.